This week's guest went from investment banker to beauty and wellness entrepreneur with products that are stocked in over 35,000 doors across the world. Today, I'm joined by Louisa Booth, founder of popmask and Blushing LA. Listen in as we chat about building a truly global brand. Louisa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I've been watching you on LinkedIn a lot, actually, and I first became aware of your brand, the sleep mask, a good few years ago, and I've been seeing the growth on and your kind of conversations that you're having on LinkedIn and on what you're doing on this in the States. And I really wanted to chat about your story and the growth of the brand. So before we get into that, can you explain a little bit about what Pop Mask is and how you started?
Yes. So I started about 13 years ago with a product called Pop Band. So Pop Bands, I don't know whether you remember them, but they were hair ties that didn't dent or damage your hair. And that came about, I was still in the world of banking, investment banking, and I was really bored and looking for something a bit more exciting. I had two young daughters, and one of my daughters, well, both of them, but one mainly used to get her hair ties kind of, she'd come out of school and I'd have to cut them out of her hair because she'd be climbing trees and all sorts of things. So I thought, gosh, these are like ripping her hair out, and I wanted to find something that was a bit kinder. So I bought some fold over elastic, which they use for underwear. So it's soft, but it's durable, and just started making them. And then we were wearing them on our wrist, and they were in, I had a roll of it that was neon pink. Anyway, that the long story short is that took off. We launched it in places like Topshop and Urban Outfitters and those kind of places. And then by chance, I got an opportunity to do a big show in a trade show in Vegas, and they put Pop Band London in an area that was Korean beauty. So everyone was coming up and saying, "Oh, are you lost?" Which obviously got a little bit dull after the third day. But we met the buyer from Ulta, and
Yeah.
I knew nothing about beauty or wellness or anything like that in the States. I knew nothing about the retail market at all. So I didn't know who Ulta were. And she still ribs me today about the fact that I was sort of like, Ulta, and I sort of shrugged and I was like, I don't know who you are. And she just was astounded. Anyway, we launched in Ulta. At the time, I wasn't set up with a US business. I wasn't set up with a warehouse, so it was a bit of a disaster, and I learned a huge amount over those 2 years. But what it did do is highlight the fact that the US market was definitely my market, and that is really where I wanted to focus.
I mean, it's huge. That's really huge, isn't it? Though to be
Yeah.
able to very early on go to that trade show and then very serendipitous and meet that buyer. Obviously, you had a good product that stood on its own to be able to do that. But just talking about that, get it? Why before you went to the trade show was the US in your mind, or was that the first trade show that you did?
That was the first trade show we'd done. And ironically, I mean, I was on holiday with my kids in Florida. My husband was back in England. And I literally said to him, they've just called me. They've had a cancellation, or somebody hasn't paid for their stand. Put as many pop bands in a suitcase as you can, and I'll meet you in Vegas. So I
Wow.
literally dragged my kids away from Disney and all of that stuff. And we flew to Vegas, and we kind of, just did a makeshift stand. We got a pop up with the logo on, and then we went to IKEA and got little white tables, and I mean it was literally just cobbled together.
Yeah.
And it, to answer your question, right, I think it was never really a business plan. I mean, I have a bit of a love affair with America and always have. My father worked in the States for much of my childhood, so we were always kind of popping over, and I was literally enamored with the country,
Yeah.
and specifically California. And so I guess I kind of made it happen
Yeah.
because of that. But it was really, really clear very quickly that, going into Ulta, that's one retailer, that's 2,000 stores. And at the time we were in Marks and Spencer's, and I think we were in about 12 stores. And Marks and Spencer's took up more time than Ulta. And so it didn't take long for me to realize that actually, the reality is that, and the business was just me at that time. So I had no help. It was just me. So I thought, okay, I've only got so much time in the day. Let's focus on, the States where I can actually get more done. Because when you get into one retailer there, it's huge.
And I think that's interesting when you said that, the UK retailer that you were with, Marks and Spencer's, took up more time than the States. What was that? Was that with red tape? Was it with paperwork?
Yeah, it really was. We had, I mean, Marks and Spencer at the time, this is over a decade ago, was, they had quite archaic processes, and so, they were, in terms of payment, never happened on time. We had a lot of problems with them as a retailer, and as I say, we were only in a handful of stores. We were in there, quite substantially, in terms of we had quite a few SKUs in there, and it was a great retailer to be in. But I only had a certain amount of time in the day.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I really wanted to switch my focus, because I thought, well, if I can get Ulta, I mean, this happened over 2 years because Ulta, although was fabulous learning experience, it was financially a disaster for the business. It was not profitable because I didn't have the infrastructure. I didn't have, I didn't know, the pick and pack costs and the warehouse costs and all of those things. I hadn't really kind of done my due diligence on any of that. I just kind of picked a 3PL and went with it. And I mean, it was literally not great. And then I didn't have the marketing.
How did you fix that then? I know that you grew more products, then you obviously diversified in different product areas, but how did you sort those issues out then in those early stages without massively increasing your costs?
Well, I didn't, and that was the problem. I think I was on the treadmill,
Yeah.
and I basically found this 3PL, and they were charging me a huge amount of money every time they picked up one of my items. And remember that these, the cost of these goods, or the retail value of these goods, was pretty low.
Yeah.
And so I just quickly learned that that was not going to work. We kept it in there, we kept going whilst I found a solution. And the first solution I found was to find a sort of it was a hybrid 3PL that also had their own vendor numbers. And so I would do the sales, they would hold my stock in their warehouse without charging me pick and pack, warehouse costs. They would charge, then I would use their vendor numbers
Mhm.
to launch in different stores. So for instance, we launched with Macy's. They had a Macy's number. So when I met Macy's, I said, we've already got a vendor number. We can get started straight away. Their eyes lit up. It was perfect. So that
So
worked
for people that are listening, for them to understand, when you need to get set up with a retailer, it's quite a long process to get you
yeah,
set up as a supplier. So if you were using then fulfillment companies that were already set up as a supplier in
yes,
terms of
correct.
and that's how you
Absolutely.
then
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's good for everyone because nobody likes those form filling days. It can take months actually. And that really worked for us for a while because we were a British business. We didn't have a US incorporation at that time, and we were basically just working with this US business. Unfortunately, then COVID happened, and that actual business, rather than our business, was not um a viable business for them anymore. So a lot of their brands just fell by the wayside. They have brands in all sorts of areas.
Yeah.
And then we had to act quickly, and it was really quite frightening because I could not leave the country, obviously, and I had to set up a new business. I had to truck all of our goods to a new warehouse. I had to set up a bank account. I had to incorporate the business over there. There was a lot to do, and doing it from a distance. And in fact, I think I found one bank. I've called every bank under the sun, one bank that would let me do this remotely. But I managed to do it. And we had a business over there, and we had an accountant, a lawyer. I mean, literally, I had the whole infrastructure. And that was in 2020, and so we haven't looked back. And so what happened, going back to the vendor numbers and those those awful sort of months that it can take to set up. We had to do all of that for everyone that we were already trading with.
Yeah.
So we were already trading with CVS, and I think we were trading with Macy's, Urban Outfitters, Anthropology, Bloomingdale's. There was about sort of, I don't know, probably about 10 different vendors, and so that took a while. So that took a couple of months, and so they halted all sales, and then we just started again. So, and this was all from the UK, so all remotely. It was a bit of a fly by the seat of your pants kind of scenario, but yeah, it was very stressful, very stressful. So you can imagine my joy when I could get on a plane finally, and I went to the warehouse and touched all the products and went, okay, everything's here. I get,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm part of it now.
Yes. And so you started with pop band, but then from you had quite a lot of imitators copying that product. What happened?
I mean, it was a great idea. It was simple. We got a lot of media coverage because, I mean, who doesn't love something that is affordable? And I learned a lot about the customer at that time because they wanted something that gave them a bit of joy. When you buy something really gorgeous and you get that kind of little bit of a high and adrenaline rush and all of that stuff. And I kind of felt that about pop bands. I was like, well, look, it's a hair tie, okay? And it doesn't damage the hair, it holds the hair up, it's kind to the hair and all of those things, but it's a hair tie. But there's no reason why something that we need can't be exciting as well. And so it was
Yeah.
that kind of giving people that joy of buying something that didn't need to be an expensive handbag or a nice piece of jewelry. It can be an everyday product that you need, but it still doesn't need to be boring and dull and practical. And so that was a big learning curve. But what happened is that people saw how popular it was, and thought, well, I can replicate this. And there was no way of protecting
Yeah.
the
There's no,
product.
you couldn't have patented it. You couldn't, obviously you can be known as the first from a brand
The
point of view.
original have time. Yeah, we didn't have time to really, and I didn't have the contacts to get it to market quick enough. So the big
Right.
boys came in, and those guys have got, they buy out the hair areas in these big retailers, and they just kind of just piled in. And we had some retailers that we were in, this is not Marks and Spencer's, by the way, some retailers that we were in that just copied us, and
Yeah.
they did it as well, which happens a lot. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. We need to evolve, and we need to
Yeah.
think about what I've learned now. And I really wanted to be that kind of sort of joyous niche product that you didn't really know you needed, that was really helpful, that was really it was an innovation that a lot of people didn't kind of know. I was up for the challenge of creating something that people hadn't tried before, and trying to communicate that on packaging. I'm really into branding and understanding the customer, which I think, over the years I've realized is my kind of superpower in terms of just understanding that. And so I really went to work on it. And actually the pop mask came from, I used to live in Japan when I was younger, and I used to use the heated mask that they use all the time, and they use it for beauty purposes. I was on a plane to America in economy, scrunched in between two people, freezing cold, wanting to sleep. I was on my way to do a QVC show in America, and I knew I had to get off the plane and go straight there. And I had to meet loads of people, and it was full on. And I sat there and I thought, God, I'd really like one of those masks that I used to use in Japan.
Yeah.
And suddenly I was thinking, oh, I wonder if because I know it was like they were everywhere in Japan. And so then I got off the plane, and straight away I contacted my friend who still lived in Japan, and said, can you send me some? And then I was like, okay, let's have a look and see if I can find somebody that makes these. And it just kind of went from there. And what I decided is that, although obviously I wasn't inventing anything new, I was taking something that I knew worked for lots of reasons, because I used to use them when I had migraines, I used to use them
Yeah.
when I was hungover, I used to use them when I was tired, I used to use them when I just wanted to relax. And obviously they have beauty benefits as well. And I could brand it so that people understood and got it and went, oh, actually, yeah, I want to try that, because I knew that once they had it in their hands, they would love it. And for so many reasons, they would love it.
I think what's great for people who don't know the brand or know what Pop Must as an overall brand, and you touched on it there in terms of finding those joyful solutions. How would you sum up Pop Masks as a brand in terms of what you do?
So popmask is a brand rather than the actual mask that we're talking about now, which is how it started. But popmask as a brand is about bringing joy to the mundane, the everyday, the, something that's a necessity, something that is a problem in your everyday life. And we try and find interesting solutions that are kind of a little bit joyous, and we make sure the packaging is premium. So I think I was one of a very few brands that had products in CVS, the same product in CVS and in Bloomingdale's. And the reason we could do that is that the packaging was premium. So it sat in Bloomingdale's and felt at home, but it sat on the shelves in CVS and people were like, "Oh my God, what's this? This
Yeah.
is really special." And I think that that's really what I was aiming for. And that day when we were in both, and they kind of knew that we were in both. It's affordable. It was under $20. We try and stick to that, kind of keeping everything under $20 or £15. And so it's accessible.
It's such a great point, I think, in terms of it's that pickup price point that for you, I suppose, when you're creating products, like, right, okay, we know we need to get the packaging on point. It needs to be within this type of price point because it might be displayed on the big, the impulse area when they're queuing for the till. And for people to try it first, it's like, oh, it's only such and such. I'll give it a
Yeah.
go, and it's that this is the thing that I know I never knew I needed in my life, but now I do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we hear it all the time. I mean, the masks, we hear from people that say, well, I use it for this reason. But then my dad said, I can't sleep at night. And they said, oh, why don't you try one of these? Or my mum gets terrible migraines and it works for that. So I think that, I just love hearing things like that, because the whole point is that everything that we kind of started with was inspired by my little family and the problems that we had. So obviously the hair ties for my
Yeah.
daughters, but then we have, we've now moved into femcare in a big way. I mean, having two daughters, was really, when you realize that they are in pain every month and not wanting to go to school and having to explain to them, yeah, you can stay off school because you've got a cold, but you have to go to school even though you have crippling pain in your stomach. Like, that's really difficult, and they're real problems that people face all the time, because it's heartbreaking. You think, well, actually, yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but it's part of how our society works. You're told to kind of suck it up and off you go. And I wanted to find something, that would make that better. And again, the having periods every month is not a joyous occasion,
Yeah.
but we want to make it like fun to shop for. There has to be something that is a little bit more fun than just picking up sort of pads or tampons and that's it. And so we wanted a drug-free alternative, because my daughters were fairly young when they started their periods. And so that was really important to me as well, because I didn't want to just be handing over paracetamol, throughout the day for the first week of, or for the week of their periods. So it is all about real life, and dealing with the stuff that life throws at you when you have a family, or whether you're just looking after your parents or yourself. It doesn't really matter. It's just sort of thinking a little bit outside the box of how these things can help people.
And where do your ideas and inspiration come from?
Well, firstly, my family. Now I'm lucky enough to have a great team around me. I recently hired a product developer who is fantastic. I've got our global head of sales. She also has, and everyone in our team are actually different ages, and
Yeah.
so they have different perspectives. and they're at different stages of life, and that's really helpful as well, because before it was just me, myself and I was like, okay, well, this is my experience of life, and I could speak to friends, but often they're around my age. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice now. We have people that are in their 20s, people, because my daughters now work for me, they're in their 20s now. And most of our other staff are in their 30s. We have a splattering of men that work for us as well. So we ask their opinions on everything. So it's quite a collaboration of ideas. And often things will start of, I'll think of something and I'll send it to the rest of the team, and then that idea will be developed, and we'll come up with something exciting.
And I think, like you said, sometimes it can be reinventing the wheel, and other times it
Yeah.
can be looking at what's already out there, like you said, with the Japanese mask, and tailoring it to your market, reinventing packaging and just making it more fun. I think that's where, you know, some people, when they have their own business, they can be very much involved in their own world, just not getting out there, feeling too consumed by the day to day, and not getting out there, seeing the ideas, because then that something can just spark, actually, we could make that better, and we could have amazing packaging, and we could add this
Yeah.
ingredient to it, or we could do XYZ to elevate it and make it right for the market.
And I think you have to you have to decide what you're an expert in. I mean, if you are an expert and you are trained to know about skincare, then great. But if you are, I'm an expert in the consumer and what they're looking for, and I like to look at things that already. It's very difficult to invent something that is not based on anything, like,
Yeah.
in terms of, we're not sort of reinventing the wheel, but we are saying, okay, here's a product. Yeah, this is really popular. People need this product, but could it be better? Has somebody looked at this recently? Can we make it more fun? Can we change the delivery method? We've just launched a range of transdermal sort of vitamin patches. They are definitely, you'll see in a lot of stuff that we make, there's a nod to the 80s, which is when I was a child. And they're like not scratch and sniff, but they're inspired by that. So they're like, and my team are like, okay, here come the 80s, like the 80s throwback. But I can't help it. It's like in my DNA.
Yeah.
But it's like strawberry shortcake smell. So you smell
Oh,
it,
yeah.
and it's like, it's that kind of, it's all of that sort of stuff. And it's just making it fun, and not taking anything too seriously. We're not curing cancer, unfortunately. We're not doing anything that is groundbreaking. We're just saying, look, we can do it better. We have, we know what works, we know what people want, and we talk to our customers. And I think that that's the other thing that we do a lot. We don't presume that we know. We're always talking to our customers. I mean, I literally embarrass my family constantly, because if I go into a store that we're in, I get a little bit giddy, and I speak to people that are shopping there.
Yeah.
And so if they're in the aisle, I'm like, okay, this is my, what do you buy? What are you looking for? And like have like a little interview there. But I'm interested. Way back when I first started, and when we launched in Topshop, the big Topshop in Oxford Street that used to be
Yeah.
there. I actually knew every member of staff in that store. I used to go in every Saturday, and I almost used to, I mean, it sounds a bit weird and creepy now, but I used to stand near where we were in the aisle, in the till bit, and we used to be sort of dotted around the store, but mainly in the till bit, and I used to tidy up
I can
the pop.
imagine. I
I
mean,
mean, I was, and my husband was like, you need to take some time.
I need to get a grip.
Get a great woman. But I would literally talk to people, and they're going, oh, what are they? And I'm like, oh, these are like I was like there just to sell pop bands. But I used to take donuts in for the top shop tea. They knew me so well. They were like, hi, I work there. Nothing phases me. I will speak to anyone, and I'm always ready to learn, always, and always interested.
And how are you getting that other than obviously the sales and reviews, how are you getting that feedback from customers now, as you're bigger and you have a much bigger SKU count?
Yeah, well, we do have a range of people that we have reached out to, that are sort of loyal customers, I guess, and we often will send them ideas, or we'll send them sort of prototypes, samples of things. But we have a lot of people that we send samples. As soon as we've got into production, we will take those samples and we will get some feedback on those things, and just gauge reaction and just understand what people think and how they use it, how easy they find it to use, that kind of thing. And of course we have a lot of buyers that we have great relationships with. So we will talk to them about, as soon as we have an idea that we think is formulating into a bit of a plan, we'll reach out to them and say, look, can I have 20 minutes? Let me run through this. And they'll give me thoughts. And that's really valuable because, but the other thing is that when buyers feel like they're part of that process, they love that because they're just as passionate about product as you are, because they want the same as you. They
They
want to
do.
make it
Yeah.
work. So when you're talking to a buyer and saying, so what do you think? Is there anything about this that you're not sure about? Would it work better? They, and you're welcoming that feedback, then they will give that. And it's really, really nice to have that direct feedback, because they're kind of saying, well, look, if you change this and do this, we'd definitely take it. It will work. And that's sort of the magic that you really want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then you can go when you're placing your orders with your suppliers, well, actually, I'm going to
You
need this.
design this.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, I'm going to need this chunk for CVS. I'm going to need this chunk for Walgreens. I'm going to
Yeah.
so that you're very much, as well as involving them in the process, but you're reducing your own risk in the quantities that you're placing with the manufacturer.
Absolutely. And I think that we're very good, and our suppliers are really great at, um, you know, putting together some really great samples so that we can go and pitch to these buyers way ahead of production, so that
Yeah,
we are getting commitment before we produce. So often it's a really difficult balance. So just so your listeners understand, so when you get a PO, when you actually get that order, often you've had to already go into production and production's finished. So
yeah,
those relationships are really important, because you need to have that trust to gauge what the prediction is. It's never going to be on point, but to have that conversation of saying, what are we thinking, how many doors are we thinking, how do you see this, and what are your expected sell through, just so that you can do the math and make sure you're not kind of vastly over ordering, and then you can work back from how long it takes you to produce the goods to make sure you've got enough replenishment. So it's a balancing act, but that's when those relationships are really important, that you can ask those questions.
so you're massively stocked in the US and you're stocked in the UK. Where else are you?
So our focus was the US for a long time. And last year, we decided that, look, we're in all of these huge, huge retailers. Let's focus on making more products for them and for everyone, but specifically so that we don't have just one or two SKUs in these huge stores. We want a presence, and we want to start building a real presence on the shelves, and we want to start having these touch points amongst within these stores, in different areas. So if you walk into a CVS, we'll be in pain and sleep, we'll be in femcare, we'll be in beauty to go, we'll be in shave. Now we've moved into all of these kind of areas. And what is nice is that then the brand starts, as the shopper is walking through these aisles, they start seeing us and going, oh, I know popmask. And
Yeah,
that's what we're trying to do. And so what we spent last year doing is developing new products, innovation, really working hard on bringing some real innovation to these stores. And we met with the buyers and we kind of pitched and we really gauged their reaction. And so we then finally sort of settled on a certain amount of products. So they're all going in. Now we're executing it this year. So that's all, because it's a long cycle of when somebody says, yes, I'd like to buy it, to
yeah,
actually getting into store. So then this year, as well as executing all of those sales, we are now going back to the UK, which is really exciting. So we have just launched with Superdrug in their shave area. We're about to launch in another area, watch your space, because it's huge, and with quite a few products. And then we're about to launch with Boots as well. So they are obviously the big ones that we really wanted to focus
yeah.
on. We're in sort of anthropology and those kind of places as well. We're in Holland and Barrett, and have been for some time. But the UK, is obviously our home kind of turf. So we really want to, now we've learned so much and we know what we're doing, we're bringing it back, and we're going to tackle, you know, the entirety of the UK. And although we are constantly being pulled towards different parts of Europe, you know, we have a lot of big retailers that want us in Europe. Going into Europe is a big commitment, and at the moment we have so much going on in the UK and the US that that's what our focus is. We sell in places like Iceland, which
Yeah.
is and we sell in the Middle East as well. And so that's fine, and that's business that we've had for a long time, and it's running really well. The UK for the next couple of years is really a big focus, and continuing the expansion in the US.
Do you approach them differently? You know, if there's people that maybe they might be the reverse of you, they're more established in the UK and they want to go into the US. If you were saying, like, what would be the differences from working with US retailers and working with UK retailers?
I don't know whether this is true or not, but it's my experience that the US retailers kind of remember you better because you're not American, that you're British. That has really helped me. I felt it really helped me because in this, you know, if you're going to a show, they will remember you, and there is more of this. Oh yeah, that's the Brit. Like
Yeah,
that's the Brit, you know, and that really helped. Certainly at the start, I think it genuinely really helped, and I think that this is a reflection of my personality. I love the openness and the collaborative feeling that you get from the buyers in the US. I find that they are much more sort of oh my god, yeah, let's do that. You know, they're just a little bit more open to kind of doing something different. Now, I say that I've just spent the day with an amazing buyer in the UK, and it's Superdrug, and she was amazing, and she was exactly that. So this is I'm kind of learning as I
yeah,
go
yeah,
now, because the UK, I'm looking at it as a fresh approach. I think that the US, the big difference is that country is so vast. I think for anyone that wants to tackle the US, do not underestimate the vastness. So just getting the product into so many hands. So when you go to the UK, you can say, okay, well, we'll put it in Superdrug, we'll put it in Boots, maybe we'll put it in Morrison's, maybe we'll put it in Anthropology or Space NK, or whatever you're doing, and you can, and then you put it in, it goes into Grazia one week, and then all of a sudden you've got a buzz. Whereas in the US, it can take years and years and years, because you've got to reach so many
yeah,
places.
yeah.
And what I think that people that don't travel to the US other than New York, LA, I don't know, Florida, there's this whole middle America that, that's when I say I understand the customer, that's who I understand. And they are not the same, and they don't want the same as the people that live in New York and LA. And I think that, and understanding how they want to spend their money and understanding what's important, all of those things need to be learned. And I think that, for me, I use things like beauty boxes and things like that to reach vast quantities of people, and just get the product in somebody's hand so they can try it and they can say, oh, okay, and then you get some back. But it takes years and years and years. So, and we did, we focused on brick and mortar. We did not focus on online sales or anything like that. So we really had to really work hard to get the product noticed. And and we launched in America probably sort of 8 years ago, and it's only been in the last couple of years that if I speak to people, they say, "Oh, pop mask." General public, not people in the
Yeah,
business, but
yeah.
you say, "Oh, I've got a brand called Pop Mask." Only recently have people sort of gone, oh, I know that, the mask, or I know that, the period thing. That hasn't happened before, so it can take like a decade.
And how are you with all the stuff that's going on with Trump and the tariffs? How are you navigating that now?
Well, that has been interesting. I mean, whenever I speak to people that are thinking of launching brands, I say to them, all the lovely frilly stuff and the stuff that's fun, is not the most important stuff. The only important thing is margin, 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 margin. That's all I say, because that is the most important. Because if we hadn't had good margins, we would not have been able to continue trading. I know so many brands that just had to halt everything. And we, there were some products that we didn't have as stronger margins, that we've had to kind of tentatively say to the buyers, look, there maybe have to be some movement on this, depending on what he decides to do, because he's
Yeah.
one day to the next it does change. But I think that the reaction to that chaos is to be calm, because nothing, even now, I mean, there's been some news this morning about the courts overturning all his tariffs. But I think that the best reaction is not much reaction at all, because we have to wait until it settles down, and we have to just ride out whatever might happen. Because I think the problem is, if you keep putting in changes,
Yeah.
the buyers are in chaos anyway, because they're having this with thousands of, yeah. And so I think that what we need to do is we need to stay calm and say, let's just let this kind of play out and see what happens. So we have had a few kind of eye-watering bills, but we're watching and waiting. And I guess I think it's because I'm not an accountant. I've been so stringent with margins, and it's been literally the thing that I'm really focused on whenever I'm looking at a new product, so that we do have enough margin to do a lot of marketing around a product, that we can really kind of do that. So we are okay. It's been pretty stressful, and every morning you wake up and you kind of look for the news. Has he changed his mind? So yeah, it's been stressful, but it's, listen, running any kind of business is stressful, and I think you just gotta, stay calm, and that's not in my nature, by the way. That's something I've learned. So I have lots of calm people around me that just go, okay, let's take a deep breath.
I wanted to ask you about, because you expanded, I mean, your first order was Ulta, and the 2000, so many stores, and the expansion into the US. And for people that are listening, with when you're dealing with retailers, your payment terms can be anything from 30 days, 90 days. I've seen 120 days. So how did you manage that cash flow from the beginning?
I think she probably felt sorry for me. I don't know. I mean, I think that was probably luck. If you get a buyer that really wants to do something, quite different, and wants to make their mark, they are looking for small brands that nobody's seen, that are exciting, and they will be a little bit kinder on you. So this Ulta buyer, you know, um, I was on at her mercy of, look, like, I can't afford to pay you. We were at the Q Barrier, which is known for being very expensive to be there, and we had 3 SKUs, but I managed to convince her to charge us for one, and I convinced her to charge us to take that money out of, to contra the money, so that I didn't have to have a big bill to pay. I mean, it still wasn't financially viable, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
I wasn't sort of faced with, I have to pay them thousands of dollars every week. I didn't have to do that.
Well, I suppose there's two things that we're talking about there. So in terms of, there's a payment term of when you got paid for your product, but also you're talking about, which what some people might not realize, if you're listening, that you were paying essentially a fee to be in a certain area of the store, because of
Yeah,
the proximity to the checkout and how
yeah,
well your
yeah.
product would have been received then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that, and what I did was, I also got that fee down even further by offering free products. So rather than paying for, so for instance, a product that costs, let's say this is retailing for $10, and let's say it costs me $2, and I'm selling it to them for $5, rather than, if the cost is $2 to me, but the value to them is the difference is that $5, then I'm basically saying, look, I'll give you one of these for every store you put me in, rather than paying this fee. And so
Yeah.
actually works a lot of the time because it works for them. It definitely works for us because obviously it's a lot cheaper. And it just means that, you know, you're showing willing. I think that that's the difference. You have to show that you don't expect everything for nothing, but there are limitations to what a small business can do and what they can afford. And they understand that. And if they really want to play in that kind of bringing anything other than, you know, the kind of the brands that everyone knows already that they can buy anywhere, then they like that. So I think it's just being a bit more creative about how you can show that willing, and rather than just handing over cash.
Is it the same in the UK? Because from my experience, because I've worked more with fashion retailers, we never had that, oh, you pay a premium for being in a certain position. But have you found the same then in Boots and Holland Barrett? Do they have that same kind of agreement that you have to pay them to be in a certain area of the store that you found?
No, no, not all the time. And I think that it's quite interesting because in the UK, people think that we are a new brand because they haven't seen us in the UK, but obviously we're not a new brand. But so I push back on most things, but I think I'm fair. I understand what they need because they, you know, the buyers that you're speaking to report to somebody and they have to show that they're kind of getting something. But you know, in the same time, you can't just agree to everything. So most of the time you don't necessarily have to pay for that space. It's just like if you wanted to be at the checkout at Boots and at the checkout at Superdrug, you probably have to pay a premium for that space because obviously it's a pick up and go space, and you hopefully your sales will go through the roof. I think everything's a negotiation. So I think that if a retailer can see that you are putting marketing money behind that, I'd rather do a marketing ploy so that you're saying, okay, the customer is going to get a discount, therefore they're going to try the product. I'd rather do that,
Yeah,
that will push the sales rather than just handing over cash, because I'm not really interested in that at all.
yeah. And you don't know how that
Um,
money is going to be spent. Are you going to be in the till in every store, or are you going, whereas you know that if you've
I
given a
mean,
discount, you're going
yeah,
to
you know how, yeah, you know how that works. You can rock up and go, okay, I've got this, and then you're. I remember when we first went into CVS and we were at Till Point with our heating mask, with Starry Eyes heating mask, and I was so excited, and I paid extra to be on the top shelf because I was like, let's go for it. And I was going into these stores, it was driving me crazy. We were like shoved like round the corner, and I had this image that we were in every store, it was going to be perfect, and we were right at the top where people would turn around and go, oh yes, I'll try this. And the reality was you're looking for it and you still can't find it because it's, I mean, I had one retailer that, so the product was meant to be like that and they put it like this, like sideways on like a record, and I was like, well, who's going to buy that? And you could drive yourself crazy because you're just literally, you're finding some poor soul that works at CVS and who really is not that interested in your problem. And I'm like,
I
oh my god, okay.
the message hasn't probably been communicated down from head office, or if it is, it's in some newsletter that's been sent to the email, to the manager's email, that never got out to
Yeah.
the shop floor staff.
And,
You know, yeah,
and
you're
they're,
absolutely
and Nicole, they're on the walkie-talkie going, there's some crazy English woman like asking me why this isn't on the top shelf. Security. So yeah, I mean, it is frustrating, and you know, all of those things are true, but the reality is that you've got to just, you know, you just got to take some of it with a pinch of salt. And especially if you're talking about, like, you know, we're in, so for I think CVS, we're in 5,000 stores or something, and so you can't, like, obviously I can't go around to 5,000 stores, and so you've just got to presume that it's all going to be okay. And then most of the time they are great, and
yeah,
actually most of the time it's done really well, and especially sort of in the actual aisles that you're meant to be in, rather at the till point, they are very stringent about where everything's put, so most of the time it is fine. um but yeah, beware. I mean, you know, the first meeting I had, I remember going into Superdrug. I actually told my current buyer this story. I went into Superdrug for my first ever meeting. I had, so we launched pop bands in Superdrug all those years ago, and I went into the meeting and she said, okay, so we need to talk about marketing budget. And I sort of said, yeah, okay. And she said, you know, so what, you know, how much money can you devote to a marketing budget? And I said, well, I mean, I don't know what you mean. She was like, well, you know, you have to pay a certain amount to be in the stores. And I was like, and I literally sat there and said, I think you misunderstand. So I give you the product and then you pay me. And she's like, yeah, I know, but you do have to. And I literally didn't know. And we sat in this office, and she was literally killing herself with laughter. She was like, "Okay, let's start from the start. This is how it works." So, I mean, I literally had no idea. I mean, I think it was always a problem of that my parents pointed out that I was way overconfident about everything. So I'd obviously got in there thinking this will be fine.
I think it's important for people to understand though as well, because there's lots of different retailers and they will operate in a different way. So I'd
Yeah,
imagine Topshop probably weren't asking you for a marketing budget.
no,
No, because they
no,
were treating you like a fashion brand. You know what I mean? And this is
exactly.
my experience when I would have worked with brands, and that is you don't, supermarkets will ask for a marketing budget, and Superdrug is in that plays in that kind of
Yes,
space,
yeah.
and so they would be asking for a marketing budget as well. And how much like would you normally have to? Would it be a percentage of your expected sales? Like how do you come to that figure of what you give as a marketing
Well,
budget?
I very rarely get asked for a figure. I think what you need is a plan. And
Right.
my plan generally is always for the first 6 months, you just gotta really go for it. And you've got to get the product into people's hands. So I think that so what you want to become is a regular purchase. And how
Yeah.
you do that, the first thing you've got to do is get people to buy the product and try it and like it and say, I'm going to buy that again. And then when they go in, they buy it again. And then after a few times, you become a product that they buy. And that's what we're trying to do. So, what we try and do is like a pulse marketing strategy for each retailer. Now, they're never the same, and it depends on the product and all of those
Yeah.
things. But what we tend to do is we tend to do certain kind of pulse marketing commitments to the customer. So, whether that's 20% off, or whether that's buy one get one free, or whatever it might be, so that it's not all the time but it's pulsed, and so
Yeah.
that's enough to become a regular purchase. And then once you become a regular purchase, it does ease off because you can't prolong
Yeah.
that.
You can't
um,
sustain that. Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
sustain that for long. But I think that that's really where we try, and we look at everything obviously by case basis. And I think it's especially true if it's a new product and you're trying to get people to pick it up for the first time.
And I think that it's so key though that you've got that knowledge now. And so I would imagine when you're developing product, your first 6 months with that product, your margin is going to be X, so your cost price
Yeah,
needs to be Y. But then after that, the profitability will go to whatever Z on that
yeah.
line.
And
Yeah,
we have minimums of that, so we will not go below a certain margin even on a worst case scenario. So we maintain those margins, and then we look at what the norm will be. And so with everything, and I think any advice, going back to the real boring stuff of margins, that's all that matters, is
yeah,
that's why it matters. Forget about Trump and what's happening there. The fact that
yeah,
you can do that. So if you're in a retailer and they're saying, hey, the sales aren't as great as we wanted, you can go, right, let's do something about this. And you have the
yeah,
margins to do that, and you can really make a plan. And I think that, you know, with all of these things, with your relationship with the buyers, it is a partnership. You both want the same things, you both want success. And so it's about kind of making sure that happens and making sure it's good for them and it's good for you. Like, everyone needs to be a winner in this, and
yeah.
especially good for the customer, because they are the people that you're trying to please. They are the people that matter, because they're the ones that are gonna buy the product. So nothing goes the way you expect. So you have some things that just fly off the shelf and that you can't make fast enough. And then some things that you just go, okay, well, this is a slower burn. This is, it's still selling well. And for the category, it's doing really well, but the sales aren't going to be as much. And, and you learn as you go along. So we know that femcare that's one of the busiest aisles in any kind of store. And so our focus has been on femcare, and we have got loads of new products. So our hero product is the Big Hug. So this is the heated patch.
Yeah.
So this is our hero product. Like literally this sells out constantly. We're constantly sold out of it. It's literally getting ridiculous. So we are building a story around this product. So we're building sort of fun accessories to period pain and period, that time of the month.
Yeah.
And so that really, it's happening more in the US, and I think it's starting to happen here, that it's not just about tampons and pads
Yeah.
and paracetamol. That there are other products that people are looking at. And obviously in the States, they're pulling in a lot into femcare. So it's like they're pulling in sexual health, they're pulling in other stuff. And we have a new launch of a menopause brand, which is blushing, and that's also being incorporated into femcare as a whole. So it's kind of like you start your periods, and then it leads all the way through to you hit menopause. And so I think that it's a natural thing to do. And actually the States are actually behind us on menopause, by the way, for once.
I think with the UK, there's been some very vocal women. I think when I think of people who've been quite vocal about it, I think about Davina McCall. So
Yeah,
there's been more people that I think that have been spokeswomen
yeah,
about it. So it's becoming more obvious and more, and then
yeah.
retailers are looking for those products and actively going out trying to find those brands that are doing those kind of
Yeah,
products.
I agree. And I think I used to say before, in the last year, it's changed in the States, but before that, I used to say until J-Lo talks about being in menopause, because she's actually my age, which my children always go, well, you don't look like J-Lo. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah,
But the point is that we're the same age. So she definitely, like, I was like, this woman is in menopause, has been through menopause, that's happening. And the point is that nobody wanted to talk about it. And then we had Naomi Watts, who launched her brand Stripes, I think they're called, and she started talking about it a lot. And now we've had Halle Berry's been talking about menopause symptoms. So we've had a lot, because before it was like Oprah, who's way
yeah,
past menopause. People like that were talking about it, but we wanted like glamorous, attractive, like just like Davina McCall was, that
yeah, yeah.
and she was talking about stuff that is not particularly glamorous, because menopause isn't particularly glamorous, and that's quite refreshing. So that's happening now in the States. So it's been on their radar for a long time. And when I developed the range from blushing, I developed it about 2 years ago, and I had the best advice from somebody that said, don't rush it, we're not ready.
Hmm.
And that was the best advice, because I am somebody that's like, boom, I've done it, let's get it to market. And the customer wasn't ready, so I didn't, and I held back, and now I think they're ready. So that's quite a big learning. That was a big learning curve for me, because I was like, because I wanted to go into the big box with it. I didn't want to mess around with kind of selling it online and doing a bit there, but I wanted to like really have a setup that was educational, that said, this is what the product is, this is why you might need it, this is the
Yeah,
symptom you might have, and this is how it might help. And so this is not, I'm not producing HRT. I'm not saying this is going to stop you being, having all the symptoms you've got. I'm saying this is helping, because I think that with menopause, if I think about my experience and I think about my friend's experience, is you feel kind of alone when it first happens, because you kind of don't know whether that's what it is. And it takes a while to realize that because not everyone has the same symptoms. So it's not like, oh, I'm having hot flushes, I must be menopausal or perimenopausal. That's not what tends to happen. What happens is over years that you start feeling not quite yourself, certain feelings and thought, all of that stuff. Mine was mainly emotional. So I would do what my kids used to say was laugh cry. I would like start crying, then I'd start laughing because I didn't know I was crying. And they were like, okay, mum's going crazy. But, and so why would I think that was menopause? I mean, I
yeah.
thought I was just plain going mad or something. I don't know. I thought, I didn't know what I thought, but it was quite frightening, because any kind of feeling, whether it's physical or emotional, that you don't normally feel, that is quite intense, is quite frightening. And I think that, that's why it has to be dealt with in a certain way. And I think you have to have some sort of educational piece, because
Yeah.
I had a call with a buyer once who came on the phone and they were all flushed. And I said to her, "You look how I look most of the time, but mine's menopause." And she said, "Do you think that's what this is?" I thought she'd just been exercising or something. And I said, "Well, I have no idea. How old are you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm 48." And I said, "Yeah, I think it probably is." And we had this long conversation about all these symptoms. And she said, "And what about this?" And she hadn't even considered that it was menopause.
I think one of the things I think that's interesting what you said is, just because you're ready doesn't mean your customer is, because particularly in the beauty and wellness, it can take you 12 to 18 months to develop a product. And there's so much coming out behind the scenes in terms of new ingredients and these other things. And when you're so involved in the product, you can get very excited, but the customer is still, they may not know about it, or they need that education, don't they? So it's teasing it in
And
before you launch it.
yeah, and I think with something like menopause, it is something that has not been discussed. And so until it's in the general public's consciousness, that they understand what it is, that they have some kind, that it's on the TV all the time, and they're, in America they
Yeah.
have like their Loose Women is like The View, and if they're talking about that on there, or morning television, they have things on there. So all of that stuff is important. So when I was talking to QVC, I was talking to QVC in the UK and the US, and QVC in the UK were like, "Come in for the whole day, we'll have a whole day of menopause stuff, and there's all these different brands." I was like, amazing. In America they went, "Yeah, you can't say the word menopause. You
Which is
can't say the
crazy.
word menopause. We like to say it's the time, it's the time, time of life or something." And that has, to give them credit, that's changing now. But I think that just shows the difference, that when a society is not educated and not ready for it, they're not ready for it. And I think that, and that's why people like Davina McCall are amazing, because she kind of brought it to the forefront. And, all credit to her, because she just not only educated women, she educated our children, our husbands,
Yeah.
like everyone. And I think that, and I thank her for that. Yeah.
Just wanted to ask you about investment and funding. So obviously you've had amazing growth. Has most of it been self-funded, or have you gone for funding?
We haven't been, well, we have used some kind of funding, but we haven't sort of sold off parts of our business or any of that stuff. So we've been bootstrapped all the way. We have self-funded. We do use, like, when there's sort of certain big deals, like we've had huge growth recently and we've had to use funding through our bank. But other than that,
Would that be like a
yeah,
bridging loan
yeah,
type
yeah,
thing?
that kind of thing. So we use that kind of funding. The company is 100% owned by
That's
us.
that's that's fantastic. Louisa. And would you ever would you go for external investment, do you think? Is it anything that you've thought about?
I mean, possibly. I think that with anything like that, it wouldn't just be about money. It would be about that partnership and what would it bring. And I think that we have a lot of potential growth. Like I say, we've stayed away from Europe and all of that stuff, because that's going to be a whole project in terms of packaging and all of that stuff. And so, there is a lot there. So with a potential partner, there may be, if it was somebody that maybe had everything set up in Europe, and they would say, "Okay, well, you could help the rest of our business in the States, and our brand can help the rest of the business in Europe," or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. I think that, it's been a juggling act, self-funding. It's not easy. Like, we are not sitting on, millions and millions in the bank, and kind of sort of saying, "Oh yeah, we can self-fund." It is a juggling act, because our growth this year has been incredible, astronomical. It's been tough, but we're getting there. And I think that, you know having the right staff and team is really important, because, and going back to that, staying calm and stuff like that, and just kind of just going, okay, it's going to happen, but we just got to be patient. And that's, I guess, the biggest learning curve.
I imagine saying no to things because there's probably so many opportunities that come your way, and like
Yeah.
you say, the opportunity in Europe, and it can be, oh, I'm a kid in a sweet shop, I'll do this, or I'll do this product, or but I would imagine saying no, that can't happen just yet. That needs to
I've
happen
done
in.
that a lot this year, yeah. And not every deal is a good deal. And
Yeah,
so it's because, and I think there has to be a switch in that attitude, because when you start, you kind of just say yes to everything and you kind of figure it out. But when you start scaling, you can't, because one mistake can really affect the rest of the business. So, you have a commitment to the stores that you are supplying and the customers that are buying in those stores, and you have to make sure that that can continue, so you don't get sort of sidetracked and go, oh, there's an opportunity, oh, there's an opportunity. And you can get excited about, especially if you're a founder. I am very easy to get kind of like, oh my god, that's so exciting. But you have to stay focused, and you have
yeah.
to really think about sustainable growth. I think that by nature, most founders are like, kind of, because you're a risk taker, otherwise you wouldn't be able to do this. And so you're like, yeah, let's do it. And that's my kind of go-to, but you have to stop and think about things. And so my attitude to everything has changed and evolved over the last 10 years completely. I'm a very different, the way I work is completely different to how I used to work, which is like, yeah, let's do it, we'll figure it out as we go along.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier on about how the team has grown this year. Who were your first hires and why?
Well, actually, I hired my husband and my children, and they would say I am like a bit of a taskmaster, because I guess I'm over the top with my children, especially, not my husband, and I expect a lot from them. And to be fair, they've seen this whole journey. They know that we had many, many years without holidays or anything. Like, I think that for anyone that's thinking about going on this journey, it's not for the faint-hearted. Like, I have remortgaged my house more times than I'd care to mention. I have, literally just kind of got by just about by the skin of my teeth for years. When you are the founder, you're the last person to get paid. You are literally at the bottom of the pile. And when you have children and a mortgage and all of those commitments, it's really, really hard. And so I think that there was a period of like 6 years where it was really, really hard for us, and as a family. And but actually, I think that for my daughters, it's been really a great learning curve, because they saw me working. Like, when I started, I had an actual job. So I didn't just do this. So for 3 years I worked in the day. So I had a job. I'd pick them up from school, I'd feed them homework, they'd go to bed, and then I'd start this job. And so I worked like 18 hours a day, every single day, 7 days a week, for about 10 years. And that's the reality of it. And
Yeah.
unless you have that passion, just don't go there. I meet a lot of people that go, I think I'm going to do this, and I'm thinking, okay, it's just very, very difficult. I didn't get any sort of financial help from anyone. I literally just started it very slowly, and it took a couple of years to get it off the ground until I could give up my other job. And even then, my husband had to work in his job to support us. I mean, it was just very difficult. So we went from being quite comfortable to being literally on the breadline for a long time. Um,
You said that you worked in both your own business and in employment for the 3 years before you left. What was it then that made you go, right, now's the time? Was it a turnover you were reaching, or was it, we can't grow unless I actually do this?
the turning point was really, I was in investment banking, and in investment banking we had a banking crisis. So I recruited for banks like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and those kind of places. And so all of a sudden there was just no work. It was just stopped. And I knew that that was coming. and it started petering out, and I was like, I need to find something else. And I'd already made these hair ties, and I was like, well, maybe that's a business. And I thought, is it a business? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I could make it into business. So it was just like an idea. So I carried on working, although that business was not flourishing, whilst I set this up. And it was about a 2-year overlap. So it was quite some time. But also I was really, really bored in my job. I wasn't really that interested. It was a complete man's world. I would go out for lunches with, no offense to anyone that knew me then, but really dull kind of, corporate financiers. And I would take my pop bands with me and go, do you have a wife or a girlfriend? Could you try give them these and let me know how they get on? And they were like, okay. So it was, I was not interested. I was not engaged anymore. I had started this kind of road to that. And then my husband said, look, if you're going to do it, just go for it. Like, we'll cope. Like, you can't shop like you did. We can't go on
Yeah.
holiday, but like, let's do this. And so I think the one thing that we've talked about it since, and he said the one thing he saw in me was like this complete 100% belief that it was going to work. And he said, and I couldn't argue with that. Like he said, you were not talking about it like, oh, let's hope this is going to work. I was like, this is how it's going to be. It's going to be huge. We're going to be a household brand. This is what's going to happen. And he was like, okay. So whether that was, just foolish optimism, I don't know. But it never occurred to me that this was not going to happen.
And so obviously you were spinning all the plates yourself, and then the
Yeah.
family came on board. But in terms of your out of family hires, so people that weren't related to you,
So yeah, okay, people that aren't related to me. So I have the literally the most amazing sort of, she's head of operations. She's basically does all the stuff that I am rubbish at, which is quite a lot, by the way. And I think that that's the other thing. If you're going to set up a business, know what your skills are and know what they're definitely not. And so she is the person that I've been referring to as my calming influence. And she is based in the States. She's actually Australian, but she's based in the States. And she basically understands the stuff that I don't understand. So we were talking about setting stuff up,
yeah,
and the systems and the EDI systems and stuff like that. Like literally, I could spend a day doing something that will take her 10 minutes. Like literally, I will sit there going, I don't understand. And she will
yeah,
just get it done. So she gets involved in all of our shipping stuff, just making sure that all our margins are correct, making sure that all costings everything's been added, so that she can just give me the information and I can just understand what's happening. So she is literally my rock. And so she's probably the most important person in my day-to-day life, to enable me to get things done that I need to do.
was she your first hire?
Yeah, she kind of was. So she came into the business when we kind of went alone, so during COVID. So I met her through, I had somebody that was from the previous company that had gone bust. She worked for me for a period of time, and she was a salesperson, but she knew this other lady and introduced me. So she was really the first key hire that really changed the business, that really made it so that I could just focus on sales. And that's what I was doing until about a year ago, where I have hired a team
Yeah.
essentially and
I
brought
mean, I
in.
think that's amazing that you've really kept it lean
Yeah,
from, I would imagine you've had contractors, you've had freelance people that have helped
yeah.
you do certain things, but in terms of you've kept it lean for quite a long period of time. Looking back on that now, do you feel that you should have hired more of a team sooner or different roles sooner?
I don't, because I think that, we wanted to grow, so every single penny needed to work for us. And I was happy to work the long days and I had lots of hats. What I wanted to do is more important for me to give away the jobs that I didn't do well,
Yeah.
that were actually taking up more time than they needed to. So like I say, the stuff that, yeah, the stuff that I don't things like sales, I can call people, I can talk to people, like I know the products, and I was developing products, designing the things. I have a great designer that's been with me since day one in pop band days, and he knows, he's somehow, I tell him a load of nonsense and he seems to know what I mean, and it works. And so that's fantastic. So I've got those key people that basically all the back end stuff is taken off my hands. She was the best way to spend money, because what
Yeah.
she did, hiring salespeople, buying her time was the best way to spend money, because she took away literally half of my day was taken up with that, and that freed me up. So I can work long hours. I'm not worried about that, and the stuff that I find easy, and I just get that done. And so those two people really helped me kind of make the most of my time. And then my husband did
Yeah.
a lot of all the warehousing in the UK, and did all of the logistical stuff of making sure stuff got shipped to where it needed to be shipped. And then basically from there, it was only about a year and a half ago, maybe, that I started looking at other salespeople, and just to support me and develop other stuff. So we had a lot of sort of the smaller retailers like Anthropology and Urban Outfitters, and what they call in America mom and pop shops, spas, kind of places that were just a lot of work, but they weren't sort of the results.
Return.
So I hired somebody with sales experience, but not in this arena, to run that. So that was taken off so I was basically looking at my time and saying, what do I need? And then really in the last year, I've hired a great sort of global head of sales, who basically really focuses on the big box retail, and just make sure that that's all running smoothly, because now we're not just kind of playing in that area, we are majorly, with 20 plus SKUs in
Yeah.
some of these retailers. We need somebody that is really sort of just focused. And so as we develop products, we basically try and get pre-orders for stuff, so that we know how much. So we don't want to have stuff sitting. We're working much smarter. So we don't want stuff sitting in the warehouse that's costing us money. We've moved our warehouse to Las Vegas, which is cheap. So we're able to look at things that are cost saving, and we're
Yeah.
just
Sure.
managing our money and our time better. I've got a team that's split. I've got a head of social media in the US, and my daughter who does all the content in the UK as well, and for the UK and US. So that's their little team, so that it helps having somebody stateside and somebody UK side. And then we have a salesperson that focuses on grocer, and then we have our global head of sales here, and then we have our product developer as well. So we've got a really nice little team, and then we've got somebody else in the UK that deals with the independents and the mom and pop stores and a few others, and she deals with all the distributors and things like that. So we've really kind of got a nice team now. And then I am sort of, all of a sudden you think, oh, I must have loads of free time, but then all of a sudden I'm on all the important calls and stuff like that with retailers. And then, all the stuff that I wanted to avoid, which is all the sort of the finance stuff and the banking stuff and the money stuff, but it has to be done, and it's a really important part of the job. And so I'm even busier than ever, but it's been really nice and sustained and well thought through and considered. Every hire has been needed, and within no time everyone is stretched and is
Yeah.
working incredibly hard. So I'm really proud of our team. We've got such a great team, and everyone brings, like, not just in their jobs but in their views and thoughts and experience, brings something different. So it's really lovely.
Just have a couple of questions for you now around your advice that you would give. But one thing I want to ask you first, though, is there's more and more founders showing up as the face of their brands. And I've noticed that you haven't done that so much in the past, but you're starting to do it a little bit more now. Is it something you enjoy, or why the change that you're starting to do it more now?
Well, mainly because we've got a social media team who are kind of forcing me into it.
I thought that might be the answer.
Literally every time I walk downstairs from my office, if I have makeup on, my daughter goes, right, you got makeup on, like, can you do this? And she sort of sits me in a chair and gives me strict instructions, and I just do as I'm told. I think, I think it's good, because I think that if I look at what I enjoy on social media, I enjoy, it sounds a bit twee, but stories, like people's experiences, and just fun things of, like, I love watching what's in my bag, travel with me. I love all of that. I don't know why, but maybe it's a sort of thing that you can turn your brain off a little bit and not worry
Yeah,
too much. So we're trying to do kind of less um sales stuff, more like a bit about us, because I think that we are growing, and I did a lot more when it was just me. So, like,
yeah,
I was in a community of other founders that were just starting, and we were all like saying to each other, that was really good, you should do more of that. And then they say, well, so should you, and you're like, yeah, I guess so. And it's just getting round to it when you've got a million jobs. But having somebody that basically I'm in the schedule of stuff, so I get made to do it. So that's the truth of it. But so I'm traveling again to the States on Monday, and so I've been given a whole thing of, come travel with me. So I'll be doing it again. So I don't mind it, and I love the fact that we are now including everyone that works for us. It's not just me, because it's not just me that's making things happen, and nobody is that keen on doing it. That's the truth. I think that you look at people that are on social media, even people that it's their job, that they're influencers and that's their job, they will always say at the start that it's kind of weird and you have to get used to it. And then before you know it, you're in the middle of the street and you put your phone down and people are like doing whatever. And I guess it's just normal now. I'm never going to get to that stage, by the way. But I think that
uh,
I'll be doing TikTok dances in the street. So I'm on the schedule to do more of that. And I think that people like that. I mean, if you think about, especially because we are doing a lot of femcare stuff, it's really important that we're not just this faceless, because I can't tell you, like, when I was in menopause or perimenopause and I was looking for products, it was all these big brands that are run mainly by men, that are just producing stuff, and you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense, that's not going to help me. Like, who's talking, who's actually delivering this stuff to women, because they don't understand what it's about. And I think that that is probably the most important reason to do it, that people
yeah,
know that there's a real person. Like, when I started doing that, the response was so lovely, like women going like, trust a mum to think of, like, sensible ways of doing things. And
yeah.
it was really nice to sort of, kind of, people got it and understood what I was, where it all came from.
And do you still get pinch me moments? Do you still go, bloody hell, we've come a long way, or wow,
Oh my
that's
God.
amazing?
Yeah. I mean, all the time. The other day, it was a thing that came up with, like, they have on Facebook, like a then and now. So there was one from Topshop, and we'd done this, like, I'd had these stands made, and they'd been made by hand because I only wanted like 5. So I went to a printer and they said, well, I'm going to have to make them by hand. And they were like foam, and they had pop band on the top, and they had like little hooks that you put in. And I mean, I don't know whether you're allowed to do this, but I took them physically into the Topshop store. I mean, as you already know, I knew all the staff there, so it was fine. And exactly. And I was like, oh, I've got some stands, like, and they used them. I mean, I don't think I'd ever do that now. Like, I don't think you're allowed to do that. But anyway,
The health and safety issues, no problem. Health and safety issues coming out your
I
ears.
know, I know. But yeah, some child chewing on the things that came out. But I did do that, and we had these funny little stands that only fitted like 6 packs of pop bands. I mean, they looked ridiculous, but I was so pleased with them. I remember being thrilled, like, oh my God. And then I look now, and I actually can't believe it. And then I have to, and even I forget all of the hardship and all the ups and downs that I went through to get to that point. So as I say, it's been an amazing journey. And I only started this brand, I'm 53 now, so I started it when I was 40. And so, like, some people think that's like a late starter, but it was the right time for me, I think. I think it was the right
Yeah.
time for me. I think it all happens at the right time. It was really, really hard.
To give people an idea of the scale of what your business is now, what can you tell us about where you are financially?
We're due this year to go from an uplift from last year by 500%, to give you an idea. So the growth, I guess the most important thing, because we have had very, very slow and steady growth to this point. And but last year was like, okay, we're going to really ramp this up now. And this year it's going to be over 500% growth.
Wow.
So it's
Well,
a
that's
lot.
amazing.
So yeah, I'm
Wow.
really, really thrilled. And as I say, I didn't think that it was actually so important to me, but having the presence in the UK is actually quite thrilling for me. I guess mainly because I have a lot of people that I don't see very often that go, "Oh, you're still doing that little business."
And now you can go, boom, yes.
I go, yeah, I am. And they have no idea. If they don't travel to the States, they have no idea. And even if they do travel to the States, they might not go into those big stores. I know it shouldn't matter, but that's quite nice that people know that, yeah, it's still going.
And
It's still happening.
yeah, but this time you're not bringing in your own fixtures and fittings into Boots.
Well, listen, never say never. That still might happen.
And what advice would you give to brands that are starting out? Would be your
I think follow your instincts always. I think stay blinkered, single-minded, like know exactly what your goal is and stick to it. I mean, listen to other people, but don't allow friends and family or strangers or anyone take you off course, because I think that people can go, oh yeah, but you've got a really good job, you should probably stay in that job, if you want to do it. But no, it is not going to be a straight road. It is not going to be without huge commitment, and and there's going to be a lot of bumps along the way, but you've just got to stay focused and keep going. And if you really, really are passionate about it, you'll do fine.
and what about those that are scaling and on the same similar kind of trajectory to yourself, or you like 3 years ago, or you kind of 3 years, what would you say to them?
I think you need to make every single penny that you spend work for you. I think it's really important that you don't just go, oh, I should be doing loads of advertising and stuff like that just because everyone else doing it. If you are focused on online, or you are focused on in-store, whatever you've decided to focus on, make sure that every penny that you're spending is going to result in real sales, because you can spend a lot of money on PR, marketing, and just throwing money away that's not actually going to help you scale. Use the product rather than money to help you scale, to put it in people's hands, give it away for free, do whatever you need to do to get recognized and get the recognition you need, but make sure every penny is working hard.
And what's one thing that you've had to learn the hard way?
Well, that
Yeah.
and I think it's the external influence. I think that I along the way I have been sold like a dream by people that are saying, oh, I can help you do this, I can help you do that. And actually most of these people are just trying, they're looking for people that are really, really wanting something to happen. I'm talking about distributors, or they call them brokers in the States, people that are just like, I can make this happen. And I'm thinking, like, I can make this happen, not you. I think that, there is a time to let go and let other people do certain jobs, but there's also a time to say, I'm the one that can sell this product the best. I'm the one that knows what, where we're going and what we want. And I think that recognize that time, because I think that I've made a few mistakes, well, many mistakes along the way, but it tends to be trusting the wrong people, believing the wrong people, and not trusting my own instinct that going, this probably isn't right, but just wanting to get there quicker. So I think just take a breath, you know, if it feels wrong, don't do it. Do it yourself. I just think that, you know, there's no shortcut to this. There really isn't.
Well, Louisa, thank you so much for being such a lovely and great guest. And I look forward to seeing you in my boots in my Holland and Barrett.
Well, I look forward to being there. Thank you so much.
And I'll be back next week with another great guest.